Welcome to Veiled Narrative Stories, where emotions wear elegance, and silence often speaks louder than words. Today's story is not just about love or betrayal. It's about the fragile dance between power and pain, wealth and wounds, silence and the voice of truth. The rain fell gently against the tall glass windows of the penthouse, blurring the city lights into streaks of gold and gray. Inside, Aidan Moreau, the billionaire every headline worshipped, stood in silence, his eyes fixed on the woman who once brought warmth into his cold empire. Alara. She wasn't meant to stay. She was hired to design his company's charity project, a temporary presence in his meticulously controlled world. But something about her kindness, her unguarded laughter, her quiet strength, had disarmed him. What began as a contract became an addiction. She taught him to look beyond profit margins, to feel, to care. But Aidan had secrets buried deeper than love could reach. A scandal threatened his empire, a truth that could destroy everything he built. And Alara, she knew it. He didn't beg for her silence, he bought it. A contract. A check that could make her wealthy for life. All she had to do was walk away. She signed, but the ink bled into her soul like poison. Months passed. Her nights were haunted by the echo of his voice, the touch of his hands, the lie of his love. The millions couldn't drown the ache. She tried to forget, but the heart doesn't understand transactions. One night, she found herself standing outside the same glass tower, where everything began. The media lights were flashing, and Aidan stood before the cameras, a king in his castle of deceit. But when he saw her, standing in the rain, drenched, eyes filled with truth, his world stopped. Her tears were silent, yet they spoke louder than gold. They carried the weight of every unspoken word, every shattered promise, every piece of the love he tried to bury beneath money. Aidan stepped forward, the cameras still flashing. For the first time, he didn't care about the headlines, the empire, or the lies. He walked toward her, the man who once bought silence, now craving the only thing money couldn't buy, her forgiveness. But Alara simply whispered, "You can't buy what you broke." She turned away, leaving behind the man who had everything except the one thing that mattered. And as she disappeared into the rain, Aidan realized that wealth could build empires, but it could never rebuild a heart that was paid to stay quiet. Because love isn't measured in millions, it's measured in moments, and he had just spent his last one. The night was dressed in silk and shadows, the kind that whispered secrets only the wealthy could afford to keep. High above the sleeping city, Aidan Moreau stood by the floor, to ceiling windows of his penthouse, the skyline glittering beneath him like spilled diamonds. To the world, he was perfection wrapped in power, an empire in a tailored suit, but beneath that calm, sculpted exterior lay a man haunted by choices that could not be undone. When Alara first entered his life, she didn't fit the world he ruled. She was everything he wasn't, soft spoken yet strong, modest yet magnetic. Her presence was like the quiet glow of a candle in a room built of glass and gold. She was hired to design his charity's next campaign, a project that Aidan had agreed to fund purely for public image. But the moment she walked into his office, wearing a white dress kissed with morning sunlight, Aidan realized he had stepped into dangerous territory. Alara didn't bow to his status. She spoke to him like he was human, not a headline. When she smiled, he forgot board meetings. When she laughed, time felt less like a currency and more like a gift. She saw the man, not the millions. And for the first time, Aidan wished he could strip away the titles and the armor his wealth had built around him. But love, when born in the wrong world, often arrives as a beautiful disaster. The scandal came quietly, like a storm that begins with one drop of rain. A former business partner had unearthed confidential information that could destroy Aidan's reputation. It wasn't just about money, it was about morality. The details could turn his empire into dust, and the worst part, Alara knew. She had stumbled upon the truth, accidentally, while finalizing the charity project's accounts. She wasn't supposed to see it, but she did. That night Aidan found her standing in the lobby, the confidential folder in her trembling hands. Her eyes were filled with something he feared more than exposure: disappointment. "You could have told me," she said softly. "I thought what we had was honest." Aidan didn't know how to respond. He wanted to tell her everything, to beg her to understand that he wasn't the monster the papers painted him to be. But fear, his oldest companion, took the lead, and fear makes even the strongest hearts cruel. He didn't plead, he offered a deal, a check, enough to buy silence for a lifetime. Alara stared at it, her heart breaking in slow motion. "You think this can silence what you've done?" she whispered, voice trembling. No, he said coldly, though his eyes betrayed him. It can protect you from what I'm about to become. It wasn't money. It was his goodbye wrapped in ink and signatures. The next morning, she was gone. Her desk empty. Her phone disconnected. The only thing she left behind was the scent of her perfume, lavender and heartbreak. Weeks passed. Aiden told himself he did the right thing, that he protected her by keeping her away from his chaos. But at night, when the city fell silent, he found himself haunted by the ghost of her laughter echoing through his empty penthouse. Every deal he made felt meaningless. Every success tasted bitter. He tried to drown her memory in luxury. Champagne, private jets, endless meetings. Yet every woman he met only reminded him of the one he couldn't buy back. Meanwhile, Alara wandered through a world that no longer sparkled. She had the money, yes, more than she could ever need. But what is wealth when the heart feels bankrupt? Her mornings were quiet, her nights sleepless. The check sat untouched in a drawer, a cruel reminder of how love can be reduced to a transaction. She missed the man who once made her feel seen. Not the billionaire, but the version of him that smiled when she teased him about his obsession with control. The one who looked at her like she was the first sunrise he'd ever seen. And yet, she couldn't forgive him, not because of what he did, but because he made her question what their love was worth. One evening, under the soft glow of moonlight, Alara sat by her window, watching the rain trace paths down the glass. Each drop felt like a piece of her heart falling away. Somewhere across the city, Aiden stood by his own window, mirroring the same scene. Two souls, divided by pride, longing for what their silence had destroyed. He had bought her silence, yes, but not her peace. And as thunder rolled across the horizon, Aiden realized something that no wealth could undo. He could control the world, but not the heart of the woman who once loved him beyond gold. Because love, he finally understood, is the one currency that collapses the moment you try to buy it. The morning sun glided across the horizon like molten gold, spilling into the vast rooms of Alara's new apartment. Every corner glimmered with the kind of elegance she once only dreamed of. A crystal chandelier draped above a marble dining table, silk curtains swaying softly to the rhythm of the city breeze, and designer boxes stacked neatly in a closet that seemed endless. To anyone looking in, she had won the life every woman envied. But inside, Alara felt nothing but emptiness. The sound of luxury had become deafening, the tick of a diamond watch, the whisper of velvet sheets, the stillness of a space too perfect to hold warmth. Each piece of furniture felt like a reminder of the price she had paid for her silence. The millions in her account had given her everything except peace. She often found herself tracing her fingers along the edge of the contract she had signed that night, the one that ended her love and began her quiet suffering. It was written in black ink, but to her, it felt carved in heartbreak. She had told herself that money would be her escape, her chance to rebuild her life. But love doesn't die in a single signature. It lingers, haunting like perfume in an empty room. Every morning, she brewed coffee the way he liked it, 2 spoons of sugar, no cream, then stared at the cup until it went cold. It wasn't that she missed the taste. She missed the man who had once sat across from her, eyes soft despite his empire of steel. Aiden Moreau. The name still stirred her chest like a forbidden prayer. She saw his face everywhere. In magazines, on television, at charity galas where he smiled that practiced smile. But she could see it, the exhaustion behind his gaze, the shadows of guilt. He was winning every battle in business while losing the war within himself. And she, the woman he had bought out of his life, carried the quiet weight of that victory. One evening, Alara attended a high society event, not because she wanted to, but because her friend insisted she step into the world again. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and champagne laughter. Men in tuxedos and women in silk glided across the floor like illusions. And then she saw him, Aiden, standing across the hall, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit, confidence radiating from every inch of him. But when his eyes found hers, the illusion broke. For a heartbeat, time froze. The crowd faded, the music dissolved, and only their silence remained. She turned away, heart pounding, but his voice cut through the air like a memory, deep, calm, and unmistakable. Alara, she stopped. Slowly, she turned. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly, stepping closer. His tone was steady, but his eyes betrayed everything, fear, longing, regret. I could say the same, she whispered. But then again, I go where I'm not paid to leave. Her words sliced through him. He had faced ruthless boardrooms, endless negotiations, and men who'd kill for power. But nothing ever wounded him like the truth she carried in her voice. "Lara," he breathed, "I never meant to hurt you." She smiled, but it wasn't the one he remembered. It was sharp, beautiful, and broken. "Of course you didn't. You just meant to silence me." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. The golden light from the chandeliers danced across her face, highlighting the tears she tried so hard to hide. "You think money can erase what you did," she said softly. "But all it did was build walls between us. Walls made of everything we could have been." He wanted to tell her that he hadn't bought her silence out of cruelty, but out of desperation, to protect her from a world that would devour anyone who stood too close to him. But even if he spoke, she wouldn't believe him now. The damage was done. Their love had turned into currency, their connection reduced to numbers on paper, and no amount of gold could buy back what the heart had lost. As the night continued, the music swelled and laughter filled the air, but the two of them stood apart. Two souls tied by a love neither could confess anymore. Later that night, back in her apartment, Alara sat by the window watching the rain shimmer under city lights. Each droplet that struck the glass mirrored the ache inside her. Beautiful, fleeting, and heavy with what could have been. She opened her drawer and took out the check he'd written. For a long time she stared at it, her reflection shimmering faintly in the glossy paper. Then, slowly, she tore it apart, piece by piece. The sound of tearing paper echoed louder than thunder. In that moment, she didn't care about the millions. She didn't care about the life of luxury she had built upon heartbreak. What mattered was freedom. The freedom to feel again, to cry, to live without a price tag on her silence. Across the city, Aiden watched the rain from his penthouse window, unaware that somewhere beneath the same storm, the woman he loved had just broken the one thing he thought could keep her bound to him. His money. She had freed herself not with words, but with the sound of tearing silence. Because some things are too pure to be bought and too powerful to be silenced. Power and love. Two forces that rarely coexist without destruction. For Aiden Moreau, the world had always been built on control. Every deal, every move, every word measured and precise. Love was never meant to be part of his empire. It was unpredictable, uncontrollable, and therefore dangerous. But Alara had been the exception to every rule he'd ever written. In the days following their encounter at the gala, Aiden found himself trapped between two worlds. The one he had conquered and the one he had lost. Board meetings felt hollow, the sound of his own success began to echo like an empty symphony. Every smile, every handshake, every congratulatory toast only reminded him of the woman whose tears had stripped him of all his illusions. For Alara, love had been a kind of rebellion. To fall for a man like Aiden was to step into fire willingly. She had seen his power, the influence that could command cities, silence scandals, move markets. Yet behind those eyes of steel, she had once seen something no one else could: vulnerability. The kind that power always tries to hide. It was that hidden softness that drew her to him, that made her believe that love could tame even the coldest heart. But power, she learned, never surrenders easily. It demands sacrifices. And love had been the price both of them paid. One evening, Aiden arrived unannounced at her apartment. The storm outside was wild, mirroring the chaos that had become his mind. Alara opened the door, surprise flickering across her face before hardening into caution. "I had to see you," he said, rain dripping from his coat, his voice low but raw. She stood in silence, the city lights glimmering behind her. "You shouldn't be here," she replied softly. "Some things can't be fixed." He stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "Then let me try anyway." Alara turned away, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of her vanity table. "You can't buy forgiveness, Aiden. You already tried that once." "I'm not offering money," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I'm offering the truth." She froze. For a moment, she wanted to believe him. To believe that somewhere beneath the layers of ambition and arrogance was still the man who once watched sunsets with her in silence, content with nothing but her presence. "Then say it," she whispered. He exhaled slowly. "I was afraid, not of the scandal, not of losing my company, of losing you. Power was all I knew. It gave me everything except peace. And when you found out what I'd done, I panicked. I didn't know how to hold on to love without trying to control it." Alara turned to face him, her eyes shining with restrained pain. "You can't love someone you want to control. You either hold them, or you cage them. You can't do both." Aiden's jaw tightened. He had built his empire on dominance, but in front of her, he felt utterly powerless. Every ounce of his authority dissolved beneath the weight of her truth. The storm outside grew louder, the wind howling through the cracks of the night, and in that small apartment filled with silence and tension, two hearts stood exposed. "I never wanted your world," she said quietly. "I only wanted your heart." He closed the distance between them, his voice trembling. "And you had it, Elara. You still do. But I don't know how to be the man you deserve." She looked up at him then, her expression softening just enough for him to hope. "Then maybe the most powerful thing you can do is let me go." The words struck him like lightning. For a man who could move mountains with money, letting go was the one thing he couldn't buy, command, or negotiate. Yet in her eyes he saw that it was the only way to love her truthfully. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch was tender, hesitant, an apology unspoken. "If I do," he murmured, "will you ever forgive me?" Tears shimmered in her eyes like dew under moonlight. "Maybe, but not today." Aiden stepped back, his heart cracking in quiet surrender. He turned toward the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. Before leaving, he looked back one final time. "You once told me that love is the only thing worth breaking for. I didn't understand it then, but I do now." When the door closed behind him, Elara felt her knees weaken. She sank onto the couch, the silence wrapping around her like silk. Her heart ached, but it also felt lighter, as if his departure had carried away the weight of every unshed tear. For the first time in months, she felt free. And across the city, Aiden stood alone on his balcony, rain washing over him. The lights of the skyline blurred through the downpour, and for once, he didn't feel like a king looking down on his kingdom. He felt like a man who had lost the only treasure that ever mattered. Power had given him the world, but love had shown him what it meant to be human. And as thunder rolled across the night, he finally understood that in the war between love and power, one always kneels before the other. This time power had fallen. The world had moved on, or at least, it appeared that way. Aiden's empire stood taller than ever. New contracts were signed, magazines crowned him the Titan of tomorrow, and photographs of him at exclusive events circulated like confetti in the media storm. Yet behind every flash of a camera, his gaze was distant, searching, haunted. Because though his life sparkled like polished marble, his heart was an unhealed wound. Elara had vanished from the circles of luxury and power, slipping into a quieter life away from the roar of city lights. She rented a small art studio near the coast, where the waves whispered more honestly than people ever did. Her days were filled with painting and silence, the kind of silence that doesn't scream but aches. Each brushstroke carried traces of him, of what once was and of what should have been. Sometimes she painted his eyes, that piercing gray, the color of storms and confessions unspoken. Other times she painted rain, endless, falling against glass much like the night she had last seen him. Her art became her voice, her way of telling the truth without words. And somewhere, deep down, Aiden felt it. He could sense her absence in ways that defied reason. In the hollow echo of his penthouse, in the way the city skyline no longer inspired him, in the scent of rain that always brought back her face. He had wealth that could silence nations, yet not the courage to silence the voice of his heart whispering her name. Months later, fate, that quiet manipulator, decided their stories weren't done. A charity exhibition was announced, showcasing independent artists who painted the unseen emotions of love and loss. Aiden's firm had funded it, ironically. When his secretary mentioned the name Elara Vale, he froze mid-sentence. For the first time in years, his pulse quickened for something not tied to profit or prestige. That evening, dressed in black as always, he entered the gallery. The room glowed under golden chandeliers, soft music floating through the air like perfume. Every wall was alive with emotion. But one painting pulled him in magnetically. It was titled, Silence in Gold. A woman stood at the center of the canvas, her back turned, surrounded by a sea of shimmering gold. Yet her reflection in a pool beneath her eyes revealed tears, silver against the golden world. The meaning was unmistakable. It was their story, and there she was, standing quietly near the corner, her hair swept into a loose knot, a simple black dress hugging her form like a memory that refused to fade. No diamonds, no pretense. Just Elara, real, radiant, and heartbreakingly beautiful. For a long time, neither spoke. The world around them blurred into slow motion. Champagne glasses, laughter, music, all irrelevant in the gravity of their gaze. Finally, Aiden walked toward her. "You always did turn pain into something beautiful," he murmured, his voice low but trembling with sincerity. Ilara met his eyes. "And you always turned beauty into something painful." He exhaled sharply, a faint smile of regret tugging at his lips. "I deserved that." "No," she said softly, "you earned it." They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the hum of the crowd that admired what they alone understood. "I never stopped loving you," he said finally, his voice breaking through the stillness like a confession torn from his soul. Ilara's eyes glistened. "And I never stopped wondering why love had to feel like losing." He took a step closer. "I thought silence would protect us, but it only buried what was real. I thought power could keep love safe, but it only made me weak where it mattered most." She looked away, blinking back the storm in her eyes. "The truth was never your enemy, Aiden. Your fear was." He nodded slowly. Every word hit with the precision of truth he had run from for too long. "I was afraid that if I told the truth I'd lose everything." "And you did," she whispered. The words lingered like smoke, soft, devastating, final. He wanted to reach for her, to ask for another chance, but something in her gaze told him she wasn't here for rekindling. She was here for closure. "The painting," he said quietly, "it's us." Ilara smiled faintly, a bittersweet curve of lips. "It's not us. It's what love becomes when truth is silenced. Beautiful, but broken." The lights dimmed slightly as the next exhibit announcement began, but Aiden didn't move. He knew this moment, this quiet exchange, was the closest they would ever come to peace. "Ilara," he said softly, his voice trembling, "if I could go back." She stopped him gently. "You can't, and I wouldn't want you to. Some stories are meant to end so others can begin." Her hand brushed against his. Brief, electric, eternal. Before she turned away, walking toward a group of admirers near her painting. Aiden stood there, motionless, as applause filled the room. The chandeliers shimmered above him, their golden light reflecting off his eyes. But it wasn't wealth that glittered there anymore. It was grief. He looked once more at the painting, the woman surrounded by gold crying silver tears, and he finally understood the unspoken truth, that love doesn't die in silence. It becomes art. It becomes memory. It becomes everything we are too afraid to say. And sometimes, the most powerful words are the ones that never leave our lips, but live forever in the space between two souls who loved, lost, and still remember. The city was quiet that evening, wrapped in a velvet dusk that shimmered with silver rain. From his penthouse, Aiden Moreau stood by the window, watching droplets trace paths down the glass, much like memories he could no longer erase. The skyline glittered beneath him, but to his eyes it was just a mirage, a reflection of everything he had built and everything he had lost. For months, he had lived like a ghost among his own empire. Every business meeting, every champagne toast, every handshake felt hollow. The laughter of others reminded him of a melody he once knew, Ilara's soft laughter, the sound that once made him forget the world. But now her silence was louder than any boardroom applause. He had seen her at the art exhibition, radiant, composed, untouchable. The woman he had once bought silence from now owned her voice completely. She had painted her truth across the walls of the world, and her art was the echo of everything he had failed to say. That night, watching her walk away beneath the chandeliers, Aiden realized the cruelest truth of all: sometimes love doesn't end with hate. It ends with peace that comes too late. Still, his heart refused to let go without a farewell. A week later, he found her by the sea. It was early morning, the kind of dawn that glowed like liquid gold across the horizon. The waves curled gently around her feet as she stood barefoot on the sand, a long white dress fluttering in the ocean breeze. The sight of her against the rising sun was like witnessing a poem come alive, fragile, luminous, eternal. "Ilara," he said softly. She turned, her expression calm but unreadable. "Aiden." He approached slowly, the wind tussling his hair, his usual confidence replaced with humility. "I didn't come to ask for anything," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "I just needed to see you one last time." She nodded gently, her eyes reflecting both warmth and distance, the way one looks at someone they once loved deeply but had already released. For a while, they simply stood there in silence, the ocean breathing between them. "I saw your painting again," he said finally. "It broke me, because it was beautiful, and I realized beauty often comes from pain we never deserved." Ilara smiled faintly, her gaze on the horizon. Pain is just love's shadow, Aiden. It follows when the light is gone. He looked at her then. Really looked at her. The woman who had taught him that love wasn't a transaction, that silence wasn't peace, and that power meant nothing when the heart was empty. I thought I could buy silence, he said softly. But I only bought loneliness. Alara turned to him, eyes glistening. And I thought I could live without love. But I only found emptiness. The truth hung between them like a whisper the wind refused to carry away. I'm sorry, he said, his voice trembling. Not just for what I did, but for the man I was when I did it. I know, she replied quietly. And that's why I forgave you long ago. But forgiveness doesn't always mean return. Her words were soft, but they hit with the gentleness of finality. He nodded slowly, his throat tight. I guess this is goodbye. She took a step closer, so close he could smell the faint trace of lavender, that same scent that once lived on his pillows, in his dreams, in his every memory. She reached up, her fingers brushing his face tenderly. You were the love that changed me, she whispered. But not the love meant to stay. A single tear escaped his eye, and she caught it with her thumb. An unspoken gesture of forgiveness, of closure, of everything words could never convey. As she turned to walk away, the sunlight caught her hair, turning it into strands of gold. For a moment, she looked almost unreal, like something too pure for the world he belonged to. Lara, he called softly. She paused. Will I ever see you again? She looked back over her shoulder, her smile soft and serene. You'll see me in every truth you speak from now on. And then she walked away, her figure growing smaller against the infinite sea, her white dress blending with the horizon, like she was being carried away by light itself. Aiden stood there long after she was gone, the wind tugging at his coat, the ocean whispering secrets around his feet. He closed his eyes and breathed in the scent of salt and loss. For the first time in his life, he felt something greater than power, humility. That morning, the billionaire who once bought silence learned that love doesn't fade when it ends. It transforms. It becomes the pulse behind every heartbeat, the ache behind every beautiful thing, the reason behind every truth we finally dare to speak. He looked down at the sand where her footprint still lingered, delicate, fleeting, yet indelibly real. Aiden smiled, the kind of smile that comes after tears, and whispered to the wind, Goodbye, my silence. The waves rolled in softly, washing her footprints away. But he didn't feel loss anymore. He felt gratitude, because for a moment in his vast, empty life, he had known something money could never touch. Love. And that was worth more than gold. Love is never measured in the weight of gold, but in the moments we dare to feel without fear. Aiden Moreau had everything the world worships: power, wealth, influence. Yet all of it turned hollow the day he tried to buy what should have been earned with truth. He learned too late that silence bought with money is not peace, it's punishment. And Alara, she was the woman who proved that the heart cannot be silenced, no matter how heavy the price. Her tears became her language, her art became her voice, and her strength became her freedom. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need validation. She needed only to walk away with her dignity and leave him with the echo of what he destroyed. A love that could have been his redemption. In the end, their story wasn't about winning or losing. It was about awakening. About understanding that love cannot exist in control, that truth cannot bloom in silence, and that power means nothing if it cages the heart. Aiden's empire still stands, tall, proud, and glittering. But when the lights fade and the applause dies, he stands alone, haunted by the memory of a woman whose tears spoke louder than gold. And Alara. She walks through life as art itself, beautiful because she was broken, powerful because she chose truth over luxury, and eternal because her silence became a symphony of strength. Their love didn't end in fire, it faded in rain, gentle, painful, poetic. Two souls that met in power but parted in peace, because sometimes the most beautiful goodbyes aren't shouted. They're whispered between two hearts that finally understand. Love can be silenced by money, but it will always be remembered by truth.